My name is Mike Lasker. I was the visual effects supervisor on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Previously, I was the visual effects supervisor on The Mitchells vs. the Machines. Before that, I worked on Into the Spider-Verse, and I've worked on a lot of animated films for the last 20 years, live action films. So I've worked in the business a long time, but I love animated projects.
How did you start your career in CG and animation?
Well, I always loved to draw when I was a kid. I loved realism. And very quickly, and I loved animation, but when I started to see movies with visual effects like Star Wars, and soon after that into the 90s like Terminator and Jurassic Park, and CG started to become into its own, I saw that as the highest form of artistic realism. So I'm like, that's what I want to do. And I knew it very early. So I set my sights. I went to college, one of the only computer graphics colleges in the States at the time, so this was like the mid-90s. And then after I graduated, I worked in New York City, and I worked at a bunch of small commercial companies and did architecture, and I did medical animation. I kind of tried everything out. But I really loved high-end commercials. So we did a lot of Super Bowl ads for like Budweiser and GE and Pepsi. I did this great commercial where this guy was having a mind trick competition with Yoda. It was right around the time of Revenge of the Sith. They were fighting over this Pepsi can. So I animated this Pepsi can that they're both trying to get with their Jedi powers. And when I was 29, I moved to LA to work in the movies, and I worked for Sony Imageworks for the last 18 years. I started with Monster House, which was the first movie and animated movie I'd ever worked on, and I loved it. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. Over my time there, I worked on movies like Edge of Tomorrow and Watchmen and other live action projects, but I really gravitated toward animation. And that's really what I devoted up until now, my career doing. I really love it.
You worked on both Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse and Into the Spider-Verse. What has been the evolution of the visual style?
Well, it's funny, when we did Into the Spider-Verse, I don't think anyone quite knew what it was going to be. We didn't know, the audience definitely didn't know. And when I came on the project, I heard there was this cool animated Spider-Man project. And this was early on. I'm like, that sounds great, I'd love to do that. And then when we started working on it and looking at the art reference, we were all like, wow, how are we going to do this? But what was exciting is every project I'd worked on before, the reference art was just reference. It would end up looking like a CG animated movie. But for this, we got to bring this artwork to life. And then we would look at these paintings, and the very first painting that we analyzed was Miles's dorm room. And we looked at this, and there were lines in the shadows, and there were halftones and Ben-Day dots like comic books, and there was just a random square of dots on the wall. We're like, is that always there? Is that there sometimes? So we had to start to figure out rules to this universe and how we would create it and give it a production value, whereas the camera moved, how do things move in 3D space? So there was just an endless amount of things to figure out, like depth of field, optical effects. So we took a lot of chances and a lot of gambles, and then I'll never forget when the first teaser came out and people were looking at it and they're like trying to make sense of, is this a 3D movie? What's up with the animation on twos? And I think it took a moment for people to kind of wrap their heads around it, but I feel like we kind of broke down a barrier. And I feel like that's what the first movie did. It created an art form that just broke down barriers that allowed the second movie to happen, where we could take what we did and build on it. So what we went through in the first one was very different than the second one. The second one, we had, the audience was kind of expecting something new and artistic and great. So there was a lot of pressure. And I was thinking, like, what are they gonna do next? Like, what's gonna be in this film? And it was a major challenge. It was so much fun. I learned so much about art and stylization. And if you wanna work on a stylized movie, this was the bonanza of stylized movies. Just every day felt like a week. There was so much to go through. I could talk about The Vulture for an hour. So like, it was so deep and complicated, but so much fun and so rewarding in the end, especially when it comes out and it connects with people.
There are multiple Spider-Verses, each with its own visual style. How did you maintain consistency between these?
Well, what's interesting that you asked that is we had to build tools to make all these worlds happen. And what we tried to do was find the common threads in all these worlds. They all had line work. A lot of them had brushing. They all had stylistic cues that we could use our tools across all these worlds, and then we would just fine-tune them and dial them for each art style. So you have a lot of the same elements running through, almost kind of like a bloodstream through all of these looks, but they all adhere to different artistic styles but have the same sort of DNA, basically. And I think that's what really connects them, because you can't have worlds that are so out there that you can't even believe them. Gwen's world at sometimes got very pushed. Earth 42 at the end got very pushed, but you still need all the characters to look like they're there. And you need to recognize the characters. They need to look like they fit. So they all need to sort of serve the story, drive the emotions, but I think we were able to do it with similar artistry, just sort of different choices.
How did you make Vulture and Spider-Punk blend in with the backgrounds and other characters?
Yeah, it comes down to how we did the first film. When you're lighting characters, to really make everyone feel like they're together in a scene, they all have to be lit under the same lights. So we typically, like a typical CG animated movie, we light all our characters together, and then we start to bring in the stylization. What was interesting about Vulture and Punk, because they're similar when it comes to, they're on pieces of paper, they're a little flatter, you want them to stand out, but they can't stand out so much that you don't believe that they're there. So we light them under the same lighting, and then we subtract. So if Vulture's flying around in a green Guggenheim, we will remove most of the color, but kiss it in a little bit. Bring a little color through the translucency of the wings. Get a little bit of the color from like a light off screen. And all the directionality of the lights lines up with Gwen, lines up with Miguel. So they're casting shadows on each other. They're affecting the scene. But you need to sort of bring the stylization in to a level. And what's great is you can modulate that per shot. So it's not always the same. Every shot is a new painting. So Punk may look one way in this shot, but another way in that shot. He generally looks the same, but he has different render styles and colors. But sometimes his paper is a little more active, or sometimes his line work is a little more visible. So you need to keep them in a box to really make it believable. But you have a lot of latitude within that box to do it.
Can you talk about the tools that were created for the production of this film?
Yeah, so we had a lot of hurdles and challenges, and I think the biggest one was brush strokes. How are we going to make these scenes look like paintings? So Brett St. Clair, who's one of our insane geniuses, created brush tools. We started to develop them in Katana, in our lighting software, using shaders, and then we quickly sort of evolved them into the comp, and we built comp tools so artists could dial things much more quickly. And one of our main tools was called the stroke system, where we could paint millions of brush strokes into a scene and populate it, and artists could control the size of the brushes, the transparency, how wet, how dry. We also created a tool called the curve system, where they could actually paint brushes in specific places, so along this table or along kind of the Guggenheim wall, because you need to have the hand of the artist to be present. And you need multiple layers of things. But one thing we found is you needed things to be really hand-drawn and hand-painted here and there. We created a tool called Kismet, which was our outline tool by Pav Grochola, another insane genius, but on the effects side. In this line tool, you'll see all throughout the movie. It's basically everywhere, but you can dial it to look like clean lines, like in 2099, like architectural lines, or messy lines, like in India. So, and it could redraw and be messy or be clean and just be active. So those are really our main tools: the stroke system, Kismet, the curve system, and then there are a bunch of other tools on the side that help support those. That was really the pillars of the look.
Are tools developed before or during film production?
Basically all of our tools evolve over the production, because the more people use them, the more you have more artists, and you need to render more. We always try to optimize, get them to go faster. The more art references we get, we have new challenges to overcome, like, oh, we need to be able to do that, so we need to have the tool be able to hit that kind of look. So both movies, they have been constantly changing. And a lot of times you'll have a class and the artist will learn stuff, and then 2 weeks later you'll have to do it again because the tools have improved. Because you need to constantly enhance them, because there are always new looks and new challenges, and the more you can make robust, versatile tools that everyone knows, I think the quicker it'll be to get to the desired result, rather than making new ones. I think we want to create like a tool set that can just get better and better and better, and everyone really gets good at it. but there's constant evolution, constant growth throughout all of these films.
What can we expect from Spider-Man beyond the Spider-Verse?
You know, I don't think I can really say anything specific. I mean, you know, I think there are things that you can assume. You know, I'm very active in keeping to progress our tools. What can we do next? What haven't we been able to do? You know, when we ended the first movie and we started the second, I wanted to take the best of the first movie, and that's our baseline for the second one. Because in the first movie, the tools evolved over the course of the movie. So for the new one, you know, I would expect that it's going to be the best of what we've done, and then it's only going to build from there and just be more amazing, I hope.
What is your personal definition of animation?
Personal definition of animation. I think something animated, there needs to be a cohesive story, an emotional story that connects with the audience. There needs to be a performance of some kind. It can be little, it can be big, but I think you want to see something that touches you, that an artist has created, that has movement, and that connects with you. And I've seen amazing animations that were simple, you know, but they tell a great story. So I think you want a small story or a big story, doesn't matter, but just something that comes to life and I think connects with you emotionally.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.